Adrianne Carter is an internationally recognized body language expert, consumer psychology specialist, and corporate trainer specializing in emotional intelligence, facial expressions, and nonverbal communication. With over 20 years of experience, Adrianne has worked with companies such as American Express, Coca-Cola, Goldman Sachs, and many more. She also works with security professionals and corporate leaders to help them decode emotions, enhance interpersonal communication, and create impactful brand key visuals. Hi, Adrianne.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for being here. I was telling you before the podcast, I am fascinated by you. I went on these deep dives of all the different kinds of work you do. And one of the things that was coming up for me initially was, how do you even train to do something like this?
So I'll give you the short answer.
Okay.
I had my children quite young and I didn't want to go back to the 9 to 5. I wanted a bit more flexibility. So someone suggested I go into market research. I was like, oh, I'd never even heard of market research 20 odd years ago. And it was absolutely fascinating. But I quickly realized that actually market research wasn't as good at that time as it could be. So I trained to be a counselor and psychotherapist. So that's where the interest that really went further, understanding what people do, why they do it, and how their brains work. And then I came across faces. I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. People pull faces. They say one thing, but their face says something different. So 15 years ago, I went to America and trained in California at the UC of California with Dr. Erica Rosenberg on facial expressions, how understanding the muscle movements of the face create these expressions which are linked to emotions. And the research world that I was still working in, even though I trained as a counselor and psychotherapist, was all about shopper behavior, how people buy, how people don't buy, all about their behavior. So it all became very, very interesting. So then I trained in body language about 13 years ago. And it's just sort of grown from there. So I left my general manager role in the research business 10 years ago. And I've just really focused everything on faces, body language, and how do we use that for the greater good, if you like, but earn money too from it. I'm not a charity.
I'm trying to do anything for free.
No. How do we commercialize that? How do we optimize our own body language? How can teams perform better by understanding facial expressions and body language? But my background was also consumer psychology. So why people do what they do. So it's kind of layers upon layers upon layers that's led me to where I am today.
Yeah. You say we can't not communicate. So even when we're not using words, we're communicating. How much of a percentage difference, or I don't know if you know the exact percentage, but how much are we actually communicating with our bodies and our faces versus our words?
So there is a stat that's often used and often misquoted actually from Professor Albert Morabian, that he said when talking about thoughts and feelings, that our body language is 55% of the communication. Now that's not true for every interaction. If I was going to give you directions now to leave your room, wherever you are, to go downstairs or to go upstairs, you'd need more than my body language. My words would be super, super important.
Right.
But that stat where I do think it is useful, it is to consider more than the words. Words are useful, but in some contexts, body language, tone of voice, facial expressions actually can sometimes outweigh the words, because we do say things non-verbally that doesn't always match our words.
Right. So you're almost, I think I heard you say somewhere, you're almost muting half of the conversation if you're not paying attention to the body language.
Yes, exactly that. Exactly that.
Okay. Well, how often in that studying of the body language and starting to understand human psychology, we also on the podcast are always talking about why we do what we do, what's driving us and all of that stuff. So how often are our emotions just vastly different from what our face and body are communicating?
A lot of the time. And I believe, and from all my research and studying I've done, that emotions drive most of our behavior. Even when you go to the supermarket to buy something as innocuous as tea, there could be some massive emotions that are driving that behavior. Now, not for everybody, obviously, but we all do things because we either like them or don't like them, or don't do things because we don't like them. So these emotions, I don't think we pay enough attention to how our internal emotions are driving our external behavior.
Say that again. How much our internal emotions are driving our external behavior. So we're just not
Ex-
even paying attention to that?
Most of the time. I deal a lot with teams, some functional, some very dysfunctional. And
Mhm.
often underneath the function and the dysfunction are emotions. When people are emotionally well, they function well and make more of an effort to function well with other people. When emotions are taking over and they're not so useful and dysfunctional teams are happening, there's often emotions that are driving that dysfunction. So finding out what the emotions are that are driving the behavior is the key really to helping them to optimize what's really going on for themselves. So understanding body language, understanding facial expressions, but also how they really feel inside, because
Mm.
that's what drives our behavior.
Isn't there a link between emotional intelligence and understanding kind of what you're talking about with the body language, the facial
Yeah.
expressions? Can you talk about that connection?
Yeah. So I was at an emotional intelligence, first one, global emotional intelligence, a conference about 3, 4 weeks ago. And when we are emotionally well, we handle problems much better.
Mhm.
When we are emotionally not well, and oftentimes people don't even realize they're emotionally not well. So they don't even realize that actually they're doing things and acting in certain ways that are it's not useful to them. Now, I believe all emotions are neither good, neither bad, but they are all a message for us. If you're feeling angry, that generally means in some way you're feeling threatened or something is in your way. If you're feeling sad, that's always about loss. And it could be a person, a pen, or a pet. There's loss somewhere, or even loss of identity or loss of role, whatever it could be. So understanding the emotions that are driving our behavior and driving other people's behaviors helps us have empathy and helps us look at the situation sometimes differently. So a team I was working with a couple of months ago, um, there was a high level of uncertainty in the team due to the
Okay.
leadership of the team. So their behaviors were very much like trying to control each other, trying to control lots of different aspects of the team. And actually, all it was causing was massive dysfunction. But actually, when you understand that uncertainty is at the root of this, how do we give control back then? How do we reassure? How do we have leadership that actually helps people feel more certain? Because once they get that, they can emotionally function well and can emotionally function well with each other. So I've made it sound very simple and it's not always that simple.
Right.
But understanding emotions is the first part of any team analysis or personal analysis that I do. Because once we know what the emotion is, then we can also understand, is it being useful? Is it not being useful? Fear is a useful emotion. It keeps us
Mhm.
safe from danger. However, in some situations, fear isn't so useful. Fear is driving your behavior at work or in your relationship, then you're going to try and control the other person or people. That's not useful.
Mhm. You know what's just dawning on me as I was listening to you give that description is you kept saying, personal awareness
Mhm.
and I think I just assumed when I was prepping for this podcast, "Oh, this will help us to understand other people." But
Yeah.
how much of this can we use on ourselves? Because a lot of times are we feeling something inside, saying something different, but then our movements, our actions, our facial expressions are communicating something completely separate from
Yes,
that?
absolutely. We often edit our words, edit what we're
Right.
saying, edit how we're really feeling. And sometimes we don't even know how we're feeling. So everyone thinks body language is all about how do I read other people? But where it's really useful is how do I read myself?
Right.
How do I understand myself better? Sometimes when I'm having a bit of an off day and I feel a bit rubbish, I'll go to the mirror and have a look because I think, oh, I don't really know what's wrong with me today, but I know I don't feel great. Go and have a look in the mirror. And I do this, and look at, oh, okay. I can see some sadness or I can see some fear on my facial expression. Okay, so that because I know what that looks like and what that means, I can adjust, I can adapt, or, do something different rather than, okay, today might be feeling sad. It's an anniversary of a loved one's death or something. Okay, so today I'm just going to be kind to myself and I'm allowed to feel sad. I'm allowed to have that emotion. Whereas if you're trying to fight it all the time because you're
Mhm.
not really sure what it is or why you're feeling so rubbish, then that's not being very kind to yourself, and it's not being aware of what's going on for you. And sometimes it's okay to be sad. It's okay to, just allow the feelings to be there because they're giving us a message. And that message is often really important.
Yeah, it's really an interesting thought to think about if we're not tapped into our own emotions, but also our own body language and our bodies are communicating, how
Yeah.
disconnected we actually may be from what's going
Yeah.
on in reality.
Absolutely.
That is wild.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I mentioned that I have to talk to you about how to use this in dating and relationships because I know my listeners that is going to be the first thing they're thinking
Yeah.
about. I heard you in another interview say that poker players are typically the best at controlling their
Mm.
body movements or body
Yeah.
language, which makes total sense. Obviously, they're trying not to give away their hand. Immediately when you said that, I thought, what about sociopaths or
Mm.
psychopaths or serial killers? Or what about a lot of my ex-boyfriends? Like,
Yeah.
that was kind of the train of thought I had. So can you
Yeah.
talk to that a little bit about who is controlling their body language in a way because they do have the awareness, or maybe they're lying or they're up to
Yeah.
something? And then we'll get into maybe a little bit how to read that.
Okay. So there are a number of types, and you've mentioned a few different types of people that will hide their body language, or not even so much hide, like a psychopath or a sociopath. They don't actually feel the feelings, so they're not hiding.
Oh,
There's
okay.
nothing going on.
Don't have it. Yeah.
They don't have it. But then there are a group of people who do hide how they feel. Now, the reason they hide how they feel could be for lots of different reasons. I often find when I come across an adult who is quite shut down emotionally and don't reveal much, I try to understand where that's coming from. And often it's coming from a time when they've not felt safe to
Mhm.
show how they really feel. So it could be as a child, it could be as an adult. It's not all about childhood. But oftentimes it's been from a time when they've not felt safe to show their emotions. So they shut down, and that becomes learned behavior then. People in the military, people in security industry, they're often quite shut down. You often don't get much emotional response. It's not true of all of them. I'm just generalizing a little bit here.
Sure.
But it's because they've had to keep their emotions in check to do the things they've done, from a security perspective. They've shut down their emotions, and then they're expected to go home and be all fuzzy and warm and emotional. It's not that easy to do. People can't do it. So
Right.
within the security industry, I do security aspect, but also from a personal aspect, you know, some of these men that go home and their wives expect them to be emotionally aware. Well, that's really difficult because all day at work, they've been emotionally
Mhm.
shut down to do the things they need to do for security. So, you know, on other times, children that have been abused, either mentally, physically, sexually, they often shut down how they feel too, because it's
Mhm.
not safe for them to show how they feel. And that can carry on into adulthood and affect all relationships. So there's lots of different reasons why people may be shut down. Not all sinister. Maybe they're just not even aware that actually this is a
Right.
good thing to show emotions.
Yeah, that's where the psychology background that you have is so fascinating with all of this to be able to look into, wait, okay, they're not showing emotions of what's
Mm,
actually happening. So how do
mm,
we decipher between a person that is like not feeling it at all and then a person
yeah.
who's maybe repressed or has been taught to not express emotion, or even like in codependency? I was thinking about my job a little bit. And when you work for celebrities, as I do sometimes, like you can't really have emotions yourself. Their world
Mm,
is the world you're showing up
yeah.
for. And so you kind of have to not be a human. So,
Yeah.
like, how do we differentiate in between the different types of people, or why there might not be either feeling emotions or showing them?
Yeah. So for me, it's all about questions, and all of body language and understanding other people. It's all about questions. How I use the body language and facial expression stuff is to ask really good questions. Because people say, "Did you just read my mind?" I'm like, absolutely
Yeah.
not. I cannot read anybody's mind. However, your body language and your facial expressions will give me a really good clue as to what might be going on for you. And I use that clue with questions to try and understand your point of view. If I assume anything, if I always assume that arms crossed is defensive, I'm going to
Mm.
be wrong probably 75% of the time, because a lot of people just sit with their arms crossed just because it's really comfortable. I do it myself.
Mm.
So it's about asking really good questions. If I was in an interaction and suddenly somebody went and their face changed and, you hear that, "Ooh," okay, I'm going to ask you a question like, "Oh, what happened just then? I feel like you shut down." But however, if someone sat in interaction and they just cross their arms and nothing else changes, I'm just going to assume it's really comfortable for them. Or I may even ask them a question and just say, everything okay with you? So questions, I think, are people's
Mhm.
best friend when it comes to this kind of work.
But that is so interesting because even if you ask someone that, that goes back to emotional intelligence because if they
Yeah.
don't know and they don't even realize they're doing something, because I think that's
Yeah.
probably very subconscious for us, right?
Yeah. A lot of the times it is. And I wouldn't ask questions for everything. I would only ask
Yeah.
a question when the interaction, I need to really clarify. I
Okay.
need to really understand what's going on for the person. I wouldn't, I was delivering workshops last week in Switzerland. And every time someone does a movement, I'm not going to ask them a question.
Right.
I'm just gonna carry on. If I see a cluster of movements or a cluster of
Mm,
facial expressions, okay, then maybe I might just say, tell me a little bit more about what's going on for you. And I'd clarify and try and, get on board with them. Or did that make sense to you? Because I've seen confusion on their face. Did that
mhm.
make sense? So I'm using this information all the time, but not in a way that becomes annoying that I clarify every single thing, because you don't always need to know what's
Right.
going on.
Right.
Sometimes you can just let it go, and sometimes you just ignore what you've seen because it's not appropriate. So I'll give you an example of that. Me and my husband were out for dinner with some friends of ours a few years
Okay.
ago, and the wife turned to the husband and said, "We're really happy, aren't we? We're happily married, aren't we?" And the husband did this
So he kind of did like a half smirk or
half smile, and we call that, it is called a half smile, but it's to do with the facial expression and the emotion of contempt, which means I feel superior. You might think that, but I don't think that. And my husband looked at me and I was like, none of our business. In
right.
that context, we've seen something that we know it means something a little bit more. His wife didn't pick up on it. None of our business. We don't ever, ever talk about that to them. We might
Yeah.
talk about it to each other in the car and we haven't like, oh, did you see that?
Right.
Um, but we certainly wouldn't say it in that because it's not appropriate, that it's not our business. And I certainly
Right.
don't want to go into marital relationship therapy. So,
Right. I was actually wondering if there is some sort of ethical guideline that you try to live by with this because you could almost it's the same way that when I speak to psychics, I'm always like, how do you not tap in on
yeah.
everyone all the time? It's almost invasive or an
Yeah.
invasion of privacy in a
It
way.
absolutely can be, yes. So for me, it's all about kindness.
Okay.
If I see something, can I deal with this in a kind way? Can I approach this in a kind way and highlight it? Or if I can't do that, then I'm not going to say anything.
Mhm.
Because for me, kindness is absolutely king. I just think this is the knowledge that I have and that I train people to have has to be used with kindness.
Yeah, that seems like a good guideline.
Mm.
Okay, to get back to dating, there have been obviously relationships I mentioned that I've been in the past where people have looked me in the eye and lied. And
Hmm.
obviously, looking back, I knew. Like,
Yes.
I'm a very intuitive person, and if I
Yes.
allow myself to tap in, I think that I instinctually am reading body language and things like
Yeah.
that all the time. But, I wouldn't take it or I would take it at face value, and I'm curious if my listeners are hearing this and they're thinking, I don't know about this guy," or they're in dating relationships or in relationships like friendships or at work.
Mm.
Is there like one red flag movement or indicator of lying that we can be looking for?
I mean, there are lots, but
Okay.
there are lots, but they all mean different things to different people. So I always say to someone, firstly, trust your intuition.
Yeah.
If you're feeling a little bit like, I'm really not sure, trust
Mhm.
that. Absolutely trust that. And I think we're taught not to trust that anymore, but we should. We should absolutely trust that. And the second one is when someone's behavior changes, notice it. So if, for example, someone's a fidgeter,
Yeah.
it means nothing. It's what they always do. It's their normal behavior. If they stop fidgeting, that's when I become interested
Oh,
because they've
okay.
changed their behavior. So
Okay.
now what's going on? If someone talks a lot and then they suddenly stop talking a lot, okay, now what's going on?
Yeah.
Because that's not their normal behavior. But that's a fail-safe rule that works with everybody and anybody.
Okay.
That sign of lying, that sign of deception. It's when their behavior changes from their norm. So you have to know somebody quite well to know when their behavior changes. So if somebody I met, oh, sorry. If I've just met you for the first time today, I
Yeah.
would have no idea what your signs of deception are because I don't know you well enough.
Right. Okay.
However, there would be things I would be looking for. So if
Okay.
you were saying things to me, I would be looking for a nose wrinkling. So this, I know your listeners can't see that, but the wrinkling of the nose where you kind of scrunch up your nose,
Yeah.
people often do that when they say something they don't believe.
I'm trying to
So,
think when I ever do that.
so for example, my friends say, "Do you want to come out with us this weekend?" And I've had a really busy week, and I really don't want to go, but I don't want to say no because I'm going to put it in the WhatsApp group later on, which is a lot less threatening. I might go, "Yeah, I'll be there," and nose wrinkling.
Oh, so when you said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah," she scrunched her nose up. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
that's so interesting.
the other thing that people do when they say something but they've got no confidence, or it could be a little bit of a porcupine lie, is the shoulder will go up, just one-sided. So a double-sided shoulder shrug means, I don't know,
Okay.
that's generally true for most people in the Western world. But when the one-sided shoulder shrug goes, for me, it's always my left, and I do this too. I can't stop my body from giving this one away.
Right.
But when my left shoulder goes, and it's just that one, whatever I've just said, I'm probably not going to do.
Okay.
So
That
that's a
is
good one.
fascinating. That is a really good
Yeah.
one. I want to
Yeah.
touch back to the first point that you made. Are our bodies communicating? I'm a big energy person, and I'm
Hmm.
just curious when you said, listen to your intuition. Immediately,
Yeah.
I thought, is there a way that my body and that person's body were communicating without us? And like we're saying different words, obviously, but like were our bodies having a whole nother dialogue?
I think so too. I'm a great believer in energy. When
Yeah,
someone walks into the room, you feel their presence or
right.
not, as the case may be. I We definitely react energetically to other people. And I think, part of the energetic stuff that I've certainly learned about, we are all connected in some way or other. You and I are connected now. We've had this conversation.
Yeah,
We are now connected. So, our energy is, I like you, you like me. That's an energy thing, as well as a visual thing, as well as a body language thing, as well as
right.
an appearance thing. I think energy is working on a whole other level, and I completely believe that our interactions are shaped by that energy.
Let's talk about eye contact because I mentioned people looking you directly in the eyes and
Yeah.
lying.
Hmm.
So I think like eye contact is always talked about as the big indicator of lying. And I think to myself, that can't be true though, because most of the people that have lied to me have looked me in the face and done it. So can you talk to about that a little bit? Like
Yes,
how do we understand what eye contact is? Is it important? I know there's a big piece of eye contact that can be for deep connection as well. So can you talk through eye
absolutely.
contact?
Yes. So normal eye contact in everyday life should be between 60 to 70% of the interaction. That's
Okay.
normal for most people. Now, neurodiverse people often, not all of them, often have less eye contact. Some people who are lying, rather than, we've always been taught, oh, when they look away, they're lying. Actually,
Right.
oftentimes the truth is it's the opposite. A liar will try to hold your gaze longer for a couple of reasons. Firstly, to make sure that you're going along with what they're trying to make you believe. And
Mhm.
secondly, because everyone knows this myth that liars look away. So I'm going to hold your gaze really
Right.
steadily so that you believe me. So that
Right.
actually the opposite is actually true, that people will hold the gaze longer than is normal because they are lying.
Interesting. Okay, well, then I've done a bunch of energy type workshops or like
Mm-hmm.
tantra with if you do like a tantra workshop, it's such a big part of the deep connection with your partner to
Yes.
do left eye to left eye.
Yes.
So why is that? What's happening with our bodies when we're engaging in that kind of eye contact?
And have you heard of the studies where you can almost get anyone to fall in love with you? I think it's 2 minutes or 3 minutes. Have you heard about that
I
study at
have
all?
okay, but I heard 7 minutes is like a deep soul connection that you
Okay.
once you look left eye to left eye for 7 minutes, it's like it unlocks some sort of soul communication or soul connection. That's the only piece that I've heard. But
Okay, I've not heard about that bit.
okay.
However, it would make a lot of sense to me. So there
Yeah.
was a study done by a psychologist a few years ago now where he got two strangers to sit, and he did pairs of people, didn't know each other. And a high percentage of these couples fell in love. And they had to ask questions. And while they were asking and answering the questions, to keep looking into each other's eyes for the whole however long. And it was something about 3 minutes. I need to check the stats on that. But
Yeah.
once you stare, or not stare, but that really make that deep eye contact, you'd begin to develop feelings, or at the very least, a bond. Now, with some of my private clients, one of the questions I always ask them is, how much do you like yourself? And which normally gets a bit of a shock, like, no one's ever asked me that before. And I'm
Right.
not talking about the affirmations where you look in the mirror and say, I love myself, I love myself. I'm talking about how much do you really like yourself? And oftentimes people will say, well, not a lot. So I
Mhm.
respond to that with, well, if you don't like yourself, what your brain is subconsciously saying is, why would anybody else like me either?
Mm.
So I get them to start looking in the mirror, maybe for 5 seconds a day, and just really look into their own eyes to create that connection.
Mhm.
And while they're looking, they can't have any judgment about themselves. They can say nice
Ooh,
things. They
yeah.
cannot say anything horrible about themselves. They can say, oh, my eyes look really good today. And this is not while you're cleaning your teeth, and it's not while you're brushing your hair or whatever other beauty routines you might have. This is just going to the mirror and looking into your own eyes. And just start with a few seconds and then build it up until it becomes really comfortable, until you can do a minute, 2 minutes, and just look at yourself without judgment. Because our self-esteem, our liking of ourselves affects every relationship we have.
That really just teared me up, because I think unless you've done that mirror work, I
Mm,
mean, it's so difficult, which is
mm,
really interesting how hard it can be to look at your
yes.
own eyes. And
Yes.
again, I didn't think about when I was first bringing up eye contact, I was just using it in relation to other people. But the
Yeah.
idea of how you talk to yourself and your relationship with
Yeah.
yourself, how much you like yourself, all the
Yeah.
messaging you're sending to your own body, that
Yeah.
is crazy to think about. So
Yeah.
if someone wanted to just start that today, if they're
Mm.
listening, how I mean, do you just say just do it as long as you can or
Yeah, I mean, don't make it so that it becomes, "Oh, I never wanna do that again." So that's why I say 5
yeah,
seconds. Some people, it's 10 seconds. It depends how
okay,
much you like or dislike yourself. Some
okay,
people find it really
yeah,
hard to just look at themselves in the mirror. So just start really small and build it up. If it's 5 seconds today, make it 6 seconds tomorrow, and maybe 7 seconds the next day until you get to 10, and then do 10 seconds for a few days. And just what you're training your mind and body is to do, become comfortable with yourself.
mhm,
And that's
yeah,
so powerful.
so powerful. And you said it in relation to, like, how much you like yourself. The
Mm,
other thing I had experience with was, going through, like, a super traumatic time and doing that kind of mirror work. I wasn't allowing myself to acknowledge the feelings of
mm,
sadness, of grief, of
yeah,
what I'd been through. And when I
yeah,
would look at myself, I would just start sobbing immediately
yes,
when I saw my eyes. It was almost like looking at a person who had been through war, like
yes,
a
yeah,
soldier coming out of
yeah,
war. But I hadn't been able to acknowledge it until
yeah.
I looked into my own eyes. And I didn't really make that connection until you just said this.
And the other thing, I don't know if you saw my TED talk, but I talk about, as humans, we need to feel seen and heard. But that
Hmm.
also means by ourselves too.
Yes.
It's not
Probably most
just,
importantly by
yes,
ourselves.
I think so. I think it all starts with us,
Yeah.
as you're probably gathering from our conversation. It starts with me. Every interaction I go into, it starts with me.
Yeah.
And yeah, I also want to have empathy with the other person. I want to interact and create great relationships, but it starts with me. If I've got a great relationship with myself, I go into that interaction in a much better place.
Mhm. Well, I mentioned I work with celebrities I do hair, makeup, and styling, so it's all
Mhm.
beauty business, and I'm curious because in 2025, it feels like everyone's either having plastic surgery or
Yeah,
Botox or filler. How
yeah,
much is that impacting what we can read with body language and facial expressions?
massively,
Really?
massively. Yes. So I have a client in production.
Yeah.
She's in production of adverts and content, and she's had quite a lot of work done to her face. And she said, "Did you notice?" And I said, "I did notice." She said, "Well, you never said anything." I said, "Well, it's none of my business.
Yeah.
I noticed, but I'm not going to say anything. That's that kindness again. It's not my job to highlight it." However, I said, "Do people find you hard to read now?" She said, "Oh yeah, really hard." She said, "But I like that." And I said, "The only thing I would be aware of if I was you is that when we can't read somebody, we become very uncertain around them, and we're more likely to avoid them. When we can read people, we engage, we pick up those empathy cues, we connect on an energetic level. When we can't do that because we can't read their face,
Mhm.
because they can't move their face in any way, we become uncomfortable as humans. So I would just be aware of that from that perspective. And that is so true. I've got a client that I've been working with for a while, and I always thought she was really cold and really hard. She's not. She's absolutely lovely underneath, but nobody knows that because she has no movement in her face. when you really get to know her, you see a little bit more movement, but
Yeah.
she's created this perfect face, absolutely beautiful, but it's hard to connect to, and people feel like she's difficult. She's really shocked when someone says that she's difficult, because like, I'm not, because inside she's got everything else
Mhm.
opposite to being difficult going on, but she's not showing it in any way.
So we will actually avoid people that we can't read.
Yes,
And we're completely that's subconscious, right? Like, we don't
completely
understand
subconscious.
why we just will not wanna
Completely
be around
subconscious.
them.
Yeah, completely subconscious. Emotion stuff happens often below conscious level. So I do, and I've done lots of examples of this, where I'll show the picture of someone smiling,
Mhm.
lovely, genuine smile on this picture, same picture, but it's a posed smile, or just a gentle smile. There's no real activation going on.
Right.
People will react 70%, 75% more with this than this. Because this, we understand it's emotional, it's authentic, it's genuine. As humans, we're drawn to it.
Mhm.
This, we're not that sure about, because we don't really know what it means.
That is fascinating because there's some times where I just don't like people and I don't know why, but I bet it's part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And your subconscious is working all the time. So
Yeah.
your subconscious may have seen something in that person that somebody else who did you wrong or you didn't like from years ago, and they've picked up similar cues and clues. So your subconscious go, I don't like you.
Mhm.
But it's all happening below conscious levels.
Right. So I know a lot of your work is working with these big brands, and we mentioned some of them at the beginning. So
Yes.
how is that tying into what you bring to these corporations as far as how they should advertise and branding and things like that?
Yeah. So all of the content, so whether it's any sort of media where it involves a person,
Yeah.
the opportunities to get it right and to get it wrong are massive. Some of the key visuals that I advise on. So what happens is that a brand, say like Dove, or, hair care brands, personal brands mostly, send me some content images that they're going to use for their advertising and their marketing. And I'll write a report on the image and say, this is how your consumers or your shoppers will feel from the talent's facial expression and body language. This is the message they're sending as a human. And it's either going to repel or it's going to bring people forward. And what we want to
Mhm.
do is we want to engage. It's not always happiness. Happiness isn't always the right emotion. Sometimes it is fear. We want to instill a little bit of fear. So I always say to the brands, start with how you want your shoppers and consumers to feel when they look at your key visual or when they look at your media. How do you want them to feel? And that's your starting point. And then you build from there with the talent. And, from casting the personality types, that's another thing that I do that I don't really shout about, but, how we can personality type people from their face, actually, and,
Right.
and perception science, how we read other people. So using that science gives brands a much better opportunity. And I worked out a few years ago now, so this has probably grown this figure, that in the UK alone, the hair care market, just for shampoos, conditioners, those sorts of products, I'm not talking about hair dye or anything else, is worth something like £39 million for women aged 18 to 34. Well, if you just
Okay.
get a 1% increase, that's a lot of revenue generated.
Sure. Yeah.
And I know from all the research I've done that if you use the right facial expression, the right body language, they'll get at least 10% more engagement, more sales.
The fact that all of that has to be thought about in making a sale is crazy, actually, 'cause I thought of casting, like, that has to
Yes.
matter. First of
Yeah.
all, from what we just talked about, like, does someone even have movement in their face? And then
Yeah.
also, like, how genuine are they gonna come across? Because I
Yeah.
think there's 2 types of actors, and some of them are believable, and then some of them you feel like they're acting.
Yeah. And so much content out there is created around the acting. Whereas what we
Mhm.
want is authenticity. As humans, that's what we respond to. The
Yeah.
fake pictures of,
Right.
nobody believes that's authentic. So
Right.
that's missing a big chunk of an opportunity that if you just capture that person in the authentic moment, it's going to do a much better job for you. I had a jewelry brand that a friend of mine, actually, it was their jewelry brand. And I said, all of the talents showing the jewelry look really miserable. Why
Mhm.
don't you just do a trial and take the faces off? So just show the jewelry on an arm, on a necklace, but take off the facial expression. sales went up with something like 76%.
Good grief. That's a lot.
And they were like, thank you very much. That has like
Wow.
transformed their business. Because they say, oh, lots of brands will say, oh, we don't want people to look at the face. We're not interested in that. We're interested in the clothes or whatever it is. I said, but as humans, the first thing we do when we come into contact with another person is look at their face. All of the eye tracking studies prove that. It's the first thing we do. So if you get the facial expression wrong, straight away, you're either repelling or engaging.
Mm-hmm.
So it just makes sense to pay attention to that, or take it off. Take the face off if it's not doing a good job for you.
Right. Okay.
Take it off.
So that's interesting to think about within social media and this kind of influencer culture, because I feel like it used to be, especially Instagram, it used to be very staged and we all kind of did this formula of look how pretty this is. But
Yeah.
what seems to be selling more now, and I've heard this across the board, is authenticity.
Totally that.
So people don't care as much about
No.
pretty, perfect, all of that. They want to be able to feel like it's real.
Absolutely. And the reason is, as we become more ANI evolved,
Mm-hmm.
deep fake photographs, deep fake videos, we want to trust what we're seeing is real. So the authenticity piece and trust are now more important than ever before. So,
Because we have a lot of fake stuff.
because we have a lot of fake stuff, and that's not
Yeah.
just plastic surgery or fillers or Botox. It's actually the deep fakes too.
Yeah.
So people want to connect in a more human way than ever before. I'm busier than I've ever been in this day and age because people want to trust. How do I show more trust? How do I make people trust me more? How do I build my personal brand so that, I sell me? That's
Yeah.
become so important.
But why isn't it fascinating that people have to ask you how to be themselves? That's
Yeah.
like in the bigger picture of this whole conversation, I was thinking, wow, how sad that we are so programmed to perform that we don't
Yeah.
even know how to be authentic anymore.
Yeah. Very sad. Really sad. But it happens more than you perhaps realize.
Well,
And
I
it's
mean,
so,
it makes total sense to me. Yeah.
yeah, it's so important that trust is going to be the new currency, actually.
Yeah. I think you're totally right, especially with AI coming so hard. Is there a moment, just to wrap things up, I have a couple rapid fire questions. Is there a moment that you've read someone wrong, that there was a big impact for that?
I mean, not recently.
Okay. You're
Actually,
like, no,
yes,
I'm
there
pretty
is
much
someone.
nail it.
No, there is someone. There is someone. So,
Okay.
a European. I'm not going to say too much because I don't want to give any identifying details away.
Okay.
But it was a man, actually. I read him really as a pompous twit. I'm trying to be
Sure.
polite. And actually, on my first impression, his body language, everything about him was designed to make people think he was very pompous and arrogant. Actually,
Okay.
underneath it, he's a really nice man. And I am actually working with him now. And if you'd have said to me, of all the people you'll be working with as a private client, he would be the last one that I would have ever said would want to become a private client of mine. And he approached me and said, I'd really like you to coach me and help me, show who I really am. Because he just had
Okay.
no idea. I mean,
Yeah.
he did the pomposity as a means of, he actually felt inside quite low self-esteem.
Sure.
So the
Yeah.
pomposity was all about putting this front on, this, the big I am, when actually he's really not the big I am. He's actually a really lovely person underneath. So I'm working with him. And I was really wrong about him because I just thought he would never be interested in
Yeah.
actually becoming who he really is and showing that authenticity and that trust. And he's a client. So yeah, I got that one wrong, actually.
That's interesting that we can almost project, like I always call that people's persona, but we can project big, puffed up, negative
Yeah.
energy too, even when that's not what's actually happening on the inside.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. Okay, what's a cue that you may still struggle to interpret in real time? Is there one?
If there's more than one person interaction, I can't capture everybody. Much as I
Yeah.
would like to be like needed
Yeah.
everybody, I can't. So I miss stuff. And also, awareness. I don't always switch this on. I'm not constantly on the lookout to read people. And sometimes I miss stuff. And somebody else will say to me, oh, did you see that? They did it. I was like, no, never even saw it. Completely unaware.
Yeah, because
because
you're
I'm not switched on all the time,
right.
looking for signs and signals. It would be exhausting.
Yeah. Is there something you're practicing in your body right now?
Yeah, I hold my shoulders up quite high.
Mhm.
And so I often find myself just relaxing, and that's anxiety actually. It's often a sign of anxiety
Yeah.
holding. So I often think, like, just remind myself to drop my shoulders, because I
Okay.
do that. One of the emotions that drives my behavior is low level anxiety. Not that I'm a
Mhm.
basket case of nerves. It's just this, learned behavior as a child that I want to do a good job. I really care about doing a good job, and that transforms itself into a bit of anxiety. So
Mhm.
oftentimes my shoulders are up here when actually they should be down here. So that's something
Yeah.
I'm working on all of
I
the
think
time.
that's a very common one, right? Like, or just being
Mm,
tense. Like, I'll sometimes notice I'm not even taking deep breaths
yes,
if I'm stressed like
yes,
that. So it's just that tension, or, we're
yeah.
holding it all in our body. That's a good one, I think, for everyone to pay attention to. Well, we mentioned the TED Talk, so I'm going to put a link to that in the bio.
Thank you.
It's actually great because it's like 20 minutes
Yeah,
max and it teaches a lot. You show the pictures of what you were
yeah,
describing with the smiles, which I found
yes,
to be very fascinating. So I will put that in the description of this
thank you.
podcast for you guys. You also have a book. Can you tell
I
us a
do.
little bit about the book?
It's a few years old now. It's called The Face Whisperer, and
Yes.
it's all about faces and emotions, and how you can pay attention to that, and the applications for that. I do have another book coming, but it's not quite ready
Oh,
yet. So
okay.
it's called Beyond Words.
Beyond
So
Words. That's a good
yeah,
name.
and it touches on that energy stuff. It touches
Yeah.
on our emotions and how we hold our emotions, and facial expressions and body language. So there's a everything about where I'm at now. It's
Yeah.
the updated version of the Face Whisperer.
I love that connection between all of them. Well,
Yeah.
we'll be on the lookout for that. Where can people keep up with you so we can see when this comes out?
LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram.
Okay.
They're my three main, and
All the
YouTube as well.
places.
Yeah, all the
Mhm.
places.
Okay. Well, I will put all of the links for you guys in the description of this podcast. I could talk to you all day because I find this so fascinating. So thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for this. I'm so excited for you guys to hear about this and just thank you for being here.
Thank you, Kelly.